Arguments in the first of two cases about same-sex marriage. Meanwhile, support for the right to marry is growing in the court of public opinion. Ed Payne has the story.
As both sides prepared their arguments, Americans marched in California and in Dallas, a show of solidarity with light. A CNN ORC poll shows that the number of Americans who support same-sex marriage has grown over the past several years. This increase also reflects a growing number of people who say they have a family member or close friend who is gay or lesbian. Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia said Monday that his views have evolved, and he now supports same-sex marriage. Last week, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton voiced her support.
LGBT Americans are our colleagues, our teachers, our soldiers, our friends, our loved ones. And they are full and equal citizens and deserve the rights of citizenship.
Though gay rights activists hope justices will endorse marriage equality, the court could choose narrower rulings. For instance, it could uphold one and not the other. It could let both stand as they are and leave the question to the political process. Or it could strike down the laws by deciding the parties defending them do not have standing or the right to bring legal action. The justices have a decision to make. We should know that decision by the end of June. Ed Payne, WSFA 12 News.
And that decision could change how America deals with same-sex marriage, including right here in Alabama. Joining us now, Dr. Paul Hart, Associate Professor at Auburn Montgomery's Department of Counselor, Leadership, and Special Education. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
20 years ago, it was 70-30 against same-sex marriage. That has flip-flopped now.
Yeah.
A growing number of folks support same-sex marriage. Why do you think there has been that shift in opinion?
I think that the public has become more aware of the people that this affects. For example, recently, I think it was Rob Portman, who was a Republican senator, came out in support after revealing that his own son, Will, was gay. And as more people become aware that this isn't a political issue, these are friends, this is family, these are loved ones that this is affecting. And so I think that more and more people are having an awareness that this is not strictly a Democrat or a Republican issue, this is a human rights issue. And while they may have their own issues with gay marriage or gay lifestyle or however you want to call it, they don't have issues with those people that they love.
For a lot of people, this is a religious issue. It comes back to religion for them. In your opinion, how does that play into this debate?
I think in particular, for one thing, civil marriage has always been simply marriage. It was up until DOMA came about, it was not defined particularly in terms of a man and a woman, it was just marriage. And however states defined that marriage was recognized between the states. For the churches and for the other religious groups that oppose gay marriage, I don't see this as affecting them in any way. There are congregations that do accept and perform same-sex ceremonies for their congregations. There's no federal law that could force a church to recognize gay marriage if it chooses not to. But in terms of separation of church and state, what is the church doing in recognizing one marriage and not another when this is a religious issue?
How do you think that shift in public acceptance of gay marriage could affect the court's decision? Do you think it could have any impact at all?
Of course, I've been listening to the pundits. It sounds as though they would say, well, it doesn't have any impact, and Bill Clinton coming out in favor of repealing DOMA doesn't have any impact. Frankly, I see it as having some degree of impact simply because the courts know that they would not be pushing the American public into something that is strictly against its will. There are those that have suggested, well, let's just put it up to a vote. We have never voted for civil rights. As a child that went through desegregation and was placed in a school that was not the one I started out in, the courts did not allow us to vote on civil rights. They said this is a matter of civil rights of Americans. And so they made a ruling based on what was equal rights for an American citizen.
What's at stake here in this ruling for both sides of the debate? We hear supporters of same-sex marriage talk about equality, talk about health benefits, inheritance, taxes.
This has a much more personal blend to it than people want to be aware of. As long as we're talking politics, we can get into our corners and fight. No one should ever have to stand in an emergency room and beg to be taken to their loved one who has been in an accident or who has died. No one should ever have to stand in a funeral home and beg the directors not to list their loved one as a single man that they are burying in the cemetery. These were my experiences. Nobody should ever have to go through that. Marriage is marriage, and it should be recognized as such. People that are vehement about this are losing the human face of suffering and pain. And Southerners in particular, I've always found to have great hearts. And when they can see past their political and religious differences to the heart of a person, I find that they're much more in favor.
There are those on the other side of this debate who say this accepting gay marriage will take away from their own marriage. Your response?
You know, there's never been any way of proving that someone being married in Winnipeg, Manitoba ever had any effect on a marriage in Birmingham, Alabama. Even some of the straight allies in this argument have said, well, you know, I've been married 5 or 6 times, and I think that the gay folks should have a chance at this just as much as anybody else. How do marriages that don't meet the practical definition by some affect other marriages? We've never seen anything. This is taking the excuse for improving my marriage and improving my relationship away from me. If you and I were married and we weren't getting along, would we be able to blame some gay couple in North Carolina? Let's be serious. This puts the responsibility on us to make sure that our relationship is everything that it should be and not putting the blame on somebody else.
You were a licensed counselor. Is this an issue you address a lot, that you deal with a lot?
Quite frequently. We will see, just on a personal note, I can share this. The proper way to respond when somebody announces their engagement to the family is A, congratulations, B, best wishes, or C, you do both realize you're both going to hell. Now, I've had folks that had that experience. And you know, we have friends that are straight that we don't really approve of their relationship, or we'd rather that they married somebody else, but they have the right to expect us to say, I wish you the very best. And for couples that come to me, they're not just dealing with trying to improve their relationship, they're also very often having to deal with the opposition of family who may have placed them at a second-class status as a family member.
For a parent who's struggling to come to terms with the fact that their child is gay, as a counselor, what do you say to them?
Recently, I sat down with a lady who was very distressed over the loss of her son. And she remarked that she had gone to the wedding reception even though she was in opposition to gay marriage. And she said, I had to, I love my son. My response to her was, having a gay son did not make you a failure as a parent. If you had turned him away and turned him out of your house, that would have made you a failure as a parent.
Well, we thank you so much for your insight. This is the case we'll be following again, the Supreme Court expecting a decision around June.